Hello, Formula One fans, and welcome to Fans Forum, the show where we put you guys in pole position, of course, front and center of the conversation. And today it's a conversation that we're going to be delving into another bumper-packed F1 race weekend. But let me ask you the question. Did you predict Piastri's performance? It was a fantastic one from him, wasn't it? Literally, from the start of the race, pushing it forwards down past Max Verstappen into the first corner. But many people, particularly Papaya fans, thought it would be Lando Norris they'd be putting their energy behind. And we'll be delving into all that and more during today's show. But we want your opinions on it as well in the chat box. So get very much involved as well. What did you think of race weekend? Were you surprised when Max Verstappen put it on pole after a pretty average performance last weekend out in Bahrain? It's a bit weird, isn't it, at the moment with that RB21? It seems on, off, and more. But we'll be getting into that and more as well with myself and my VIP co-host, who today is none other than the lady herself, Karina on the grid. Karina, thank you for joining us. How are you this evening?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am fantastic. I'm really excited to talk about this race. I love talking about F1. I'm ready to go.
Brilliant stuff. Great to absolutely have you here. Of course, we've experienced the fastest street circuit in the world. It was pretty exciting from my perspective. Some people out there, I was speaking to a friend in the States and he said, oh, when the McLaren got in front, nothing really happened. And I'm like, did you not see the other 19 cars and what went down? And I think maybe we need to have people understand that, listen, there's a whole lot of battles going in and around the grid as well, isn't there?
100%. I think that's something that I've been really thinking about this season, is that often there's a lot of focus with the front of the grid and, you know, everyone wants to see who's going to win. But actually, I think this might be the season of the midfielders. I think there's some really interesting things going on with Williams and Haas. And yeah, I'm excited to see what goes on there. I think
there's a huge fight, isn't there, for P5, it seems, in the constructors. I know Williams are boasting this weekend. Last weekend it was Haas. But listen, Karina, we're going to get into each team in a little bit more detail in a little while. And a big shout out to Gary, who's a regular, who joins us once again. Evening, Gaz. Thank you so much for being in the chat box, as always. Karina, before we get into talking about the weekend, first up, I'd like to know a little bit about how your love affair with Formula One actually began.
Yeah, so it was a early on in my life love affair. It started when I was 8, and I think it's quite the classic story of your family's watching it and you end up watching it, and yeah, it just, I think I've never really gotten into other sports as much as I have done with F1, and I don't know what it was about F1 either. I don't know why I was so interested in it at age 8, but I loved it, so it's just kind of continued on from there, and here I am.
Yeah, and the Drive to Survive series, like many people, did it kind of turbo inject that passion as well?
No, I know, surprisingly. No, I know. I'm one of those people who thinks that Drive to Survive is fantastic, and I think it gets a lot of hate that it shouldn't do. And I hate when people say that you're a DTS fan and stuff, because I think that's really unfair. But it's something that I enjoy, but it hasn't really changed the way I view F1, I suppose.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's good to hear that you're a real passionate fan, and maybe one before the big hype and the X Factor entertainment style come into the race series. You're a purist, some might say. One of those that's out there with the flags want to bring back their V10s, perhaps. But listen, Karina, action-packed weekend, right? Mm-hmm. For me, every qualifying has been so far, literally at the end of it, you're just like, oh my God, how did that happen? But we saw a race that started with Max Verstappen on the front row. But for the first time in Jeddah, we saw someone outside a pole position win the race. And that was Oscar Piastri, the flying Aussie, who's now won his 3rd race of the season. I've got to start, Karina, by asking you, what have you made of Piastri so far? Is he the man to beat now at McLaren?
I think that's a really interesting one. I think that Piastri, the one word that really comes to my mind when I think of him is consistency. I think you just know he's going to do well. You know he's performing. I think he's fantastic. But I think people are kind of quick to like discount Lando as well. And I think perhaps there's kind of this energy of that people sort of prey on Norris to have his downfall, and they're really excited for Piastri and are ready to go with him. And I don't know, No, I think don't discount Norris just yet. I think we could see something from him, but I think it's going to be a very, very tight battle between the two of them. It'll be interesting to see how McLaren deal with their whole everyone's our first driver situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Oscar's great. Oscar's fantastic, but don't discount Norris.
Yeah, I mean, Lando, we know he's a fantastic driver, but he seems to struggle to get on top of that McLaren a little compared to Oscar, doesn't he? You said, Oscar seems very level-headed, etc. And maybe as well, Lando's focus to detail could be called into question at points. He was really hard on himself once again after the collision in Q3, wasn't he? Referring to himself as an idiot. No one is perfect, but of course, in this world of Formula One, we need you to be as perfect as possible, don't we? How's Lando going to bounce back from this?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think Lando is probably the person who we see the most struggling with their mental health, at least outwardly to everyone. And I do feel for him in that sense. I think he's got a lot of pressure on him, and I don't know how he bounces back from this. I think hopefully he has good people around him to talk to, and maybe he has like psychologists and stuff to talk about all of this, because I was reading a paper recently about mental health and Formula One, and I think it's really interesting to see just how they don't quite know how it's going to affect them just yet. But there's a lot of pressures on them right now, and it's probably not talked about as much as it should be. But yeah, I do get what you mean, that he has his problems as well, and like I said, probably not as consistent as Piastri, and maybe that's why he does fluctuate a little bit, and maybe that will be his downfall.
We've got Gary in the chat box saying he feels like Lando was pushing too hard, wants to be contending each lap and each race with qualifying. I guess, is there a part of a winners and a champions mentality, knowing that moment to push, and also knowing perhaps if your capability isn't quite there alongside competitors in the qualifying, to leave it to the race when you can build up slowly but surely?
That's a good point, but then I think you got to go for it when you can, and perhaps maybe that's where his issue is maybe he's going for it when he shouldn't be at points. But I suppose if you aren't going for it, what are you doing? So I don't know.
Well, I mean, I say this because it was really interesting I don't know if you saw the observation from Karun Chandhook when Lando had his collision in Q3, and Karun was saying, well, look, you can see there, he's not tight enough on the corner. So to not pull out of that, I guess it's to pull out of that lap or sector at the very least. Yeah. That's where he's putting himself at risk. But then we have to remember, like you said, he is a young man, Lando Norris. Is he 24, 25? So a young man still, and he will learn from this and come back a better racer, we imagine.
Yeah, I'd like to hope so. I think, I'm the same age as him, and I think I am very much that mindset of you get down in these spirals and you think, I can't do anything and this is all going wrong. Why is it working out for everyone else? And I imagine perhaps that's the same thing for him. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he does need to clean up with getting a bit neater on certain areas. But then, I mean, he was close to winning last year, relatively. I mean, okay, he wasn't close, but, close enough. I think he's got a little bit cleaning up to do, but I think he can do it. I think he can.
Gary just backing that point up, just saying that on a tight track as it is, you need to get that banker lap in first. And yeah, Lando really paid the price there. What did you make, Karina, of last week before race weekend? Lando came out in the press conference and he said, I'm going to win the championship my way as a nice guy. What did you make of those comments? And is that perhaps another comment that allows the vultures to circle a little?
Yeah, I think on one hand, I appreciate how open he is. On the other hand, I do think sometimes sets him up for people to grasp onto what he's saying. And in the press conference this week, or was it this week or last week? One of the two. I think it was last week. They were then asking Piastri about this comment and whether he agrees with it and stuff. And, if it's getting picked up to that extent, I think people will take those kind of comments and run with them. I think he's fair enough to say that, and if he feels like he can win it his way, then I'd like to see him try. I don't think every champion has to be the same, but I would say there's a certain level of confidence that we see in Verstappen and Hamilton, for example. I always think that moment when he was on the podium and he like turned his back and he was pointing there and he had champagne being sprayed on him. And I think there is that kind of confidence that perhaps that's what makes you a multiple champion. I don't know if Lando has that quite yet.
And Oscar Piastri on the other side of the garage. I mean, are you already sensing that oozing that kind of class from him? And how does it play out? Let's say Oscar Piastri goes on to be, for the time being, a stronger driver. Where does that leave Lando within the unit of McLaren?
Gosh, really good question there. Well, I think with Piastri, it doesn't seem like it's really in his nature to be anywhere similar to the kind of like the way that Hamilton and Verstappen have kind of portrayed their confidence. And so I think if it was on him, it would just look quite different. But I think I am seeing that because he's got that consistency, and I believe now on Sky Sports, the bets, it says that he's bets like, okay, I don't do betting, so I can't think of the technicalities there, but he's like odds on to win it. So I do think everyone's seeing that, he has got something there. And I don't know what it would do to someone to have been in a team for, how long has Norris been there? 6-7 years now with McLaren?
Yeah, something like that.
And then for someone to come in and within 2-3 years, like to then win it, I imagine that must be really difficult on him. And I do wonder whether
if Oscar becomes a champion, then do you become a number 2 driver, or does Zach Brown still say that they're both open to fight? And this is only a question that Zach Brown can answer, but Oscar Piastri, in such a short amount of time, like you've just made the point, is showing he is up there with the best on the grid.
Well, exactly. And yeah, you're right. I don't think you can keep saying, well, they're equal, they're on the same footing, when I'm sure them get put into their faces. Well, Oscar won one, so you can't, it doesn't work like that. I think there is a sense that Piastri could win, and I don't know what that would do for Norris. I do worry in that sense because, like I said, he's quite hard on himself. And yeah, I really don't know what they would do. I think they will try and stick out with their whole "we have one driver" situation, but will that work for them? Has it always worked in the past?
Yeah, I know. Well, listen, we will see. We will keep our eyes glued to our screens and our racetracks. We're almost a quarter of the season in already. Can you believe it? After the next race, it will be in Miami. That triple header has really put us in a bit of a whirlwind, hasn't it? But just to touch base on Lando's strategy, Gary makes a really good point that, the team there saving Lando's weekend, really. It shows that they are still collecting around him, but then also that Lando can deliver on race day. So like you said, if you take it easy on yourself, Ellen, then maybe you can pull something special off this season.
Yeah, that is really, really true. I mean, he made up 6 places, so he made a great recovery drive. And yeah, no, I think they did really well with the strategy. And I think it's interesting, the conversation around, is it the car, is it the team, is it the driver? Because I think Norris has quite often, in a couple of recent interviews, said, oh, but people are often saying it's just the car. And it's not just the car, it's the drivers as well. And we're doing stuff. And I do think sometimes the team doesn't really get as much a mention just in general for what they're doing. And it was a very good strategy from them. It was really smart and it paid off.
Yeah. And also, I guess, take for granted when you see multiple champions, people like Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen just doing it lap after lap, week after week. You take that for granted, and we're seeing this next generation come through. And I really hope that some of them go on to be multiple champions. But you're seeing when the spotlight is on and the pressure is on, that you can begin to make these mistakes. And maybe Oscar Piastri at the moment has that advantage, that it seems a lot of the spotlight across the world of media, and when they're looking at Papaya, everyone's focusing on what Lando's doing. Now, the deeper it goes into the season, if Oscar keeps performing how he is, he's going to start to feel that weight, similar to what Lando felt towards the end of last season, isn't he?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think, like I said, the media have kind of, it just feels sometimes like it's preying on Lando's downfall. And like maybe if they have Piastri coming through and they start to shift that focus, maybe we can even see Norris do better if that happens, which would be a really interesting twist. Yeah, but I think because Piastri is so calm, I don't know if he'd react similarly. And it would be interesting to see. It would be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and one of the biggest shocks, even for me, when I was watching it, is that Piastri beat Max off the line, and
Yeah.
everyone, and I think it was 2/10 in the end that
Yeah.
he actually beat him off the line by, and you're like, wow, it's few and far between that people do that. I think I see Lewis beat Max off the line since this Max domination era. I think Lewis beat him once by like 1/10. But everybody else that's been alongside him, we're always like, well, they don't stand a chance against Max in the first corner. And Oscar's shown that he is ready to go toe to toe with
Yeah.
Max Verstappen and stick it where it needs to go, and then make Max do the thing, pull out of the move, etc. What did you make of that little incident? You think it played out fairly with the 5-second penalty? What's your opinion?
Oh, do you know what? I think sometimes, if I'm being completely honest, as a creator, I often feel like I have to understand things straight away. And so I was getting a bit frustrated that I couldn't quite understand what was going on and who I thought was sort of right in that situation. But I've done a lot of looking into it. And I think ultimately it was Piastri's corner, and the penalty was simply because he overtook him going off track. So I suppose in that sense, if you just look at it as he overtook him going off track, yeah, it was fair. But I do think it was a bit more of it was a difficult one to look at because I suppose, so there's some arguments that, well, if he didn't go off track, where would he have gone? Others say, well, he should have backed out sooner. And, I think Max really knows the rules. He has got them on the back of his hand. He knows what he's doing. And arguably, maybe he kind of played into knowing the rules quite well here and kind of hoped it would pay off. And perhaps it didn't. Well, it didn't in this scenario, but yeah, I don't think it was clear cut, but it was a little bit weird, a little bit different.
Yeah, at the time, Martin Brundle was giving actual real good explanations, talking about all the data that the stewards would have access to. And he was saying by the point, I think it was the apex in the corner, Oscar was ahead, but Max very cleverly took his foot off the brake. So then his car went ahead, but he's gone ahead in a point in the corner where he's not going to make it. And he said, like you're saying, they're very clever to manipulate the car being in the right position, but the stewards are no fools. They're going to look at the holistic picture and then make a decision. But Karina, listen, off the back of the decision that happened in the 5-second penalty, let's move it on to the Red Bull performance across the weekend. And let me start the first question with you. Were Red Bull right in not just insisting to Max to give back the place, and then they wouldn't have got the 5-second penalty? What did you make of that strategy, I guess?
Well, when they were speaking to Horner, he said that they didn't give it back because the dirty air was a big issue for them. And I suppose to them, they're thinking, well, I'd rather have 5 seconds in clean air than stick them into dirty air. And as we're seeing this year, dirty air is playing a really significant role, actually. And Leclerc said, I believe it was after the race, that we're seeing that the race is kind of won a little bit by who has clean air. And so I get why they made that decision. If they didn't think they were in the wrong and they knew dirty air was not going to help them, yeah, you might as well take the 5 seconds.
There was a really interesting point. I can't remember what one of the commentary team made it, but they said they were talking to Alex Albon, and that during the timeout on circuit, that a kind of, because it's a street circuit and it's all narrow and almost tunneled the way that they've made the circuit on the streets of Jeddah, there becomes like a wind that blows through it that actually propels you along, like a sea current almost. So like you said, there's such an impact of what the other cars are doing in and around you to your own aero performance. And I must caveat that by saying to fans watching that that's only going to get worse, I understand, from the regulations next year. The regulations next year, the F1 cars are going to be a lot less capable to deal with dirty air from a competitor, but that should create more will-to-will racing, apparently. And I guess we'll find out.
Well, yeah, but interestingly, in a press conference, Sainz was saying that no one seems to like the 2026 regs, so that's a bit weird. And it was kind of alluding to the idea of why are we going with them if no one seems to like them. So it will be interesting to see how this all pans out. Surely, if so many people who have seen how this is going to affect the car are saying this, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. We'll see what happens, but.
Let me ask you a question as well. I found myself during the race, and it felt quite foreign during the race and during qualifying, in fact. All of a sudden, I was cheering the Red Bull because, you know, this era of domination they've had, you cheered everyone else. And maybe that's me because I'm more of a race series fan than a particular team's fan. But I was like, come on, Max. And I was like, hang on, what? I'm usually so against Max because you don't want one team to dominate. What about for yourself? And are you noticing that more with fans now? Is it maybe that, you know, that the McLaren car becomes the pantomime bad guy?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing that I've noticed as well. So I'm similar to you in that it's more following the actual series than following specific teams. I think it depends on the season. It's kind of, I'll support the underdog. So this year I'm like, yeah, go Mercedes. What? Yeah, love it. But yeah, it does swap. And yeah, so I think it's quite interesting. I'm seeing that there's quite a few people who are perhaps like 33 or 44 fans, and they're supporting the other side rather than wanting McLaren to win, which is a really interesting dynamic. And, you know, you wouldn't often put that together. But yeah, I do think there's a real shift. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a dislike towards domination, the dislike towards Norris. I'm confused, but yeah, definitely a bit of a shift with fans.
Yeah, Gary's just asking, saying, would he have still got the 5-second penalty if he had given the position back? The answer is no, Gary, because he got the penalty because he gained an advantage by going off circuit. If he'd immediately given that advantage back, but Red Bull were arguing on the radio, and then as Max has said in post after the race, that they saw it a different way, and so I guess they were hoping to get away with it. But on that point, even Karina, let me ask you, what have you made of Max's sound bites since the race when he's saying, I can't even give my true opinion on it because I'm just going to get myself in trouble? And this leans into your mental health thing again, doesn't it? He said everyone's become too sensitive now. So Max is from the Red Bull tough love school, isn't he?
The one thing about Max is he will stand on his business. If he feels a certain way about something, you'll make sure everyone knows about it. And I think that's what he's doing here. I'd say he's probably the most vocal out of the F1 drivers right now about these new anti-swearing, anti-bad word situation things that's going on. And he's made it really, really obvious that he's not happy about it. I think even on the podium, I don't know how many people clocked it, but he banged that, I forgot the word for the drink. Anyway, and he just went straight for drinking it. And it was, I think he did not care. And yeah, I do think it's quite interesting that he really does feel that kind of way. And we also saw when he was speaking to the FIA president during Parc Ferme, it looked like a bit of a heated conversation. So I think he's very well aware of the fact that he could be put into a lot of danger by saying how he really feels. I believe as of right now, since the penalty point system came in 2014, he has the highest total number of penalty points. It's 42, I believe. So he like, even though he's not had a race ban and it was Magnussen who got one, he's aware that he could end up having one. And I think it's quite smart on that. And he really, like I said before, he knows the rules so well. And he doesn't want to lose his position. He doesn't want to stop racing. So I get it, but I think he's really putting up a stand against this. He's very clearly not happy.
I guess to a certain extent, he knows that he is still just about the current poster boy, would you say, of the sport, being the 4-time world champion, and understands that weight and knows that, well, listen, if you're going to nitpick me about things that happen, and I do feel his pain, particularly when, you know, people are going on about swearing in moments of passion. And you're like, I remember they mic'd up footballers in the 1980s and how they talked to referees. And let me just say, they never did it again. But yeah, so I can completely understand Max's frustration with that. But let's move it forward. I just want to ask you about the RB21, Karina. Why do they seem at the moment to have a car that's on, off? Like, they really don't seem to understand it, do they? And I know a lot of people thought that the Red Bull would struggle again this weekend because Bahrain's only down the road and it's another hot circuit, etc. But today, Max got it. Well, sorry, yesterday, Max got it going.
Yeah, it's definitely one that's kind of bamboozled me as well. I think the thing with the RB is that when it comes to Max, if he can get it in the right window, he is flying. He loves it, but it's just that window is so narrow, and I think perhaps they do understand to a certain extent where it's going wrong, but there's not much they can do to fix it. You know, they've got things like the cost cap. They're thinking about next year's regs as well. And although I don't think they've, especially with the top 4 teams, that they've moved on to next year entirely, I think there's probably only a certain amount that they can do to fix it. I do think to a certain extent, though, they're also a bit confused. And I don't know. I think that's why it's really difficult to even say what's going on with it. I think, you know, I don't know. The RB is very complicated. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the small operating window that it has.
Yeah.
Maybe they felt that Yuki had figured it out because a double points finish in Bahrain. Then he qualified well here in P8, but Yuki only got, what was it, 3 corners out of the race, unfortunately. What did you make of the incident between Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly? Anyone's fault or purely racing incident?
I think it was purely a racing incident. And I thought it was quite sweet to see their post-race interviews. And Gasly was saying something along the lines of, I know Yuki's intentions. I know, you know, he didn't mean it. Or and Tsunoda was, you know, disappointed, but he wasn't there thinking, oh, I'm annoyed at him or whatever. So I think, yeah, sadly, just a racing incident. Arguably, maybe they could have done things slightly differently, but it happens.
And next race in in Miami, do you expect the RB to still be up there, or are they going to fallen back away to the midfield? What are your thoughts on that? Or is it how long's a piece of string? I have no idea.
I do think it's a little bit how long's a piece of string at this point. I think it's going to suit McLaren really well. So I think we'll probably see a big difference between McLaren and Red Bull. Whether that drops Red Bull all the way down, I don't know. But I mean, it's a circuit that will demand a lot of the drivers because they are going to be constantly going because the tyre deg isn't as bad as other circuits. So I think in that sense, because Max is very, you know, he's very on top of it, very on his game, that would probably suit him quite well. Will it suit Tsunoda? I don't know as much. I feel like we don't know as much about Tsunoda's mindset, or at least not compared to Verstappen. So yeah, I don't know. I think once
Yuki's still got to be getting used to that car a little bit as well, hasn't he? We've got to get cutting some slack.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I was really happy for him when he got it because he's wanted it for a while now. But it's a shame that we don't really know how he's performing in there just yet. But Horner seems to be quite happy with him and really positive about it. So hopefully it will go well for him. I think maybe, yeah, I think maybe Red Bull needs to get on top of their balance issues as well. I think that'll help all of them. Well, both of them. I say all of them as if there's multiple drivers. It's just the 2 of them, but yeah, both of them.
Let's take a look at the Scuderia Ferrari and their performance across race weekend. Charles Leclerc boasting their first Grand Prix podium of the season. Is that relative success, or is it, oh, well, this is a season that isn't going to plan? What do you think Ferrari fans out there are feeling?
Oh, you know what? I think Ferrari gave quite a bit of hope to the Tifosi. I think coming out the back of last season, especially having a 7-time world champion, let's be honest, I think everyone was kind of expecting them to be fighting for wins, and they're not. And I don't really know what's happened there. I think it's a difficult one because they've brought in their upgrades, and I do think with Ferrari it takes them maybe 2 or 3 races to kind of settle into a pattern and see the upgrades actually work for them. But as of right now, it doesn't. I'm sure statistically or looking at the data, the floor has made a difference, but I don't know if it really made that much difference. I think what really helped with Leclerc is that he was doing really well in his first stint on the mediums, and it was pretty similar, I believe, to McLaren on the hards, and then he was quick on the hards as well. So I think it's just his tyre management, and that area worked really well for him. But I think it is hard to tell, especially when we don't really know what's going on with Hamilton, and I don't think his issues are necessarily just about the car. So we can't even make that kind of comparison and think, yeah, well, they've just got some issues to work out. I think it's quite difficult.
Yeah, Lewis cut a really full-on figure, didn't he? Once again, saying it's going to be painful, possibly for the rest of the year. Is there a little bit of Lewis that's a la Lando, though, that he's being a bit harsh on himself? So, like, when you look at the data, because last race, I think in qualifying, he was only about 6/10 off Charles Leclerc. He was 5/10 off Charles in qualifying this time around. And again, he's only 5 races deep compared to 6 years. And I know he's a multiple world champion, Lewis, but it is going to take time. And not only himself, but the fans need to have patience, don't they?
I think they do. I think this was something they were talking about on Sky, and I think Brundle was saying something along the lines of he doesn't quite believe it's just that Hamilton's not gelling with the car or something like that. It was something along those lines. And then they were kind of pointing out, well, Sainz has said he's quite surprised that he's been able to adapt to the Williams so quickly. And I think with people like Antonelli, he's been able to adapt because he had loads of practice sessions. And I think people aren't cutting Hamilton as much slack as they should be. I think being with a team for as long as he has been, he's got all that muscle memory. That's going to make a difference. It's a completely different engine. Of course, I think there was that hope he would do really well and we would see this incredible season. But actually, if you look at his previous when he swapped over from teams, it has taken him a season, and then the next season he's great. And there's a lot of similarities between now and when he moved from McLaren to Mercedes. So I think maybe see what he does next year. I think this year's probably him just getting up to speed with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, because I was talking to a fan early doors in the season before anything had kicked off, and they were saying, yeah, but look at when he went into the McLaren and how great he was, almost winning a championship. But that was in an era when you could test unlimited. Like at the race circuit, whenever you wanted to, like Mercedes have done with Antonelli, like you mentioned, Lewis could just drive hundreds and hundreds of laps getting used to that car. And that doesn't exist anymore in a modern car. Anyway, there's limited testing of old cars you can do. And that's what Mercedes have taken advantage of with Antonelli. But Lewis literally had a couple of days in old SF, whatever number it was, and then a day and a half with the car in Bahrain. Fred Vasseur has come out, though, and very much defended his main man, hasn't he? And he's saying, look, media, stop trying to create headlines. We're all pushing in the right direction and we'll get there. Is that, you think, something he believes, the Ferrari boss, or do you feel he's just doing what he has to do?
Look, I think you've got to believe it if you're the team principal. You've got to back your drivers. And that's something that I appreciate from him. I think Vowles, we've seen that quite a bit as well. To be fair, Horner goes hard for Verstappen as well. So we see that from them. And I think that is a really important thing for the team principals to have. I think he's got to say that it's going to go well. And I think he really hopes that it is going to go well. And I think he's right. I think there's this thing where people like to run away with the results very quickly and probably don't consider what's really going on. And even we saw that with what they call the team radios, and he had to kind of defend Lewis on that and say, well, not everything was shown in the Chinese Grand Prix, because people can run away with headlines very, very quickly. And, I'd argue if it wasn't, well, on one hand, I say if it wasn't Lewis Hamilton, then he wouldn't have this much focus on him. But at the same time, it is Lewis Hamilton. So there is that expectation that he's going to do well. We
have to remember, don't we? We're in a society where fans are emotional and media understand that, and they want to harness that. We're in an era of clickbait, aren't we? Yes. So they're looking for a soundbite from Fred. They're looking for something that's just going to evoke reaction from fans. So, and you do see it every race weekend. Is Lewis hasn't got it, or there's this secret that Lewis has now found out for the ones that have now got hope. That's just the world we exist in. And the only thing that really matters is the timesheet, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, fair play to them. They've got to do what they've got to do. I get why they do it as well. It's the name of the game, really. But look, I don't think count Lewis out yet. After all, during the race, he did a really good job of defending, and of those between lap 13 and lap 15, and he's still got it in him. He hasn't given up just yet. But
great little battle with him and Lando, wasn't there? And just still showed how smart Lewis was. And then then Lando, I don't know whether Lando learnt from it or the engineer was in his ear and said, right, remember, be smart. You need to do it like this. Or whether Lando already had that in his pocket. But Lewis was like, I've got you, youngster. Don't worry. I know exactly how I'm going to play this and defend as much as I can.
Yeah, exactly. I believe I saw someone saying it was the engineers telling Norris. Maybe it's people who hate Norris at the same time. So I don't know for definite. But Yeah.
I understand that the Papaya Army is actually being split, not to bring it back on McLaren, but they're actually going up against each other now about who's the best within the camp. And, there is no I in team. And we must always remember that the team's priority is to win the Constructors' Championship first and foremost.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that is why they made the decisions they made last year. They were thinking about the constructors, and it paid off. They won. So,
let's push it forward to the Silver Arrows. And I'll ask you what I asked our guest last week. Is maybe Lewis Hamilton's pain slightly enhanced because he's watching George Russell be one of the stars of the grid, possibly, if we relatively talk about the machinery underneath him, and the youngster Kimi Antonelli, who is theoretically in Lewis's seat, performing gallantly as well. Another great race weekend for them, really, the Silver Arrows. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it's fantastic watching them. I think, like I said, I love a good underdog story. And I think they came into this season, we were all thinking, yeah, Ferrari, McLaren, and Max. And then suddenly they're doing pretty well. I believe Russell has got a top 5 streak now going on. And I think he's the only no, I won't say that. But I believe that he's done really, really well in that. And, Antonelli generally has done quite well as well. I think there was one P11, but apart from that, he's sticking quite close. And I think, when it comes to Lewis, it's a really difficult one because ultimately, I think he was going to have had to have left the team this year based on the contracts. And I think that's something that was quite well known. So I think he made the right decision. I think he's staying longer in F1 because he made the move. I don't think there was another option for him. But I do imagine it might be a bit like, they say when you you're in a relationship and you develop the person and, they're great and they're amazing. And then you break up and then suddenly you see them great for another person. You're like, okay. I imagine it might be something similar to that.
That's all my hard work over there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's not just Hamilton. I never want to say it's just one driver, but he definitely contributed. We know he was taking a lot of their experiments the 2 years before he left. So I think it must be difficult to watch.
Yeah, so Gary's just talking about Kimi Antonelli, saying he's definitely one to watch for the not too distant future, and he thinks he'll be on a podium, Kimi Antonelli, before the end of the season. What do you make of that, Karina?
Yeah. No, I think, Gary, you're right. I agree. I think Antonelli, there's a reason why Toto wanted him. That, let's not be silly. Toto knows what he's doing. He's a smart businessman. He knew. And it makes sense. I think Antonelli's been super impressive. And yeah, do you know what? A podium I don't think is out of the question. Maybe even in a sprint race or something. I feel like, no, do you know what? Go on. I think you can do a Grand Prix. I think you can do the full race.
Yeah, come on, the young man. All right, so you've said that Toto Wolff is clear, and we can see why he wanted this young man, Kimi Antonelli, in the second seat of Mercedes. So let me pose the question to you, Karina. Does Toto Wolff still want George Russell in his first seat at Mercedes?
Oh, isn't this the question?
And is this what's maybe spicing George up this season? And even if we look at the Drive to Survive episode, which I think was titled "You're My Number One," and it's what got George's juices going and put a fire under him. The fact that he needed to prove it, and now we know his contract's ending at the end of the year. He's been set a challenge again.
Yeah, do you know what? I think from what we've heard, I guess what kind of goes on in the background, George and Toto have a really good relationship. And I think that's very important when you're in a team to get along, to have that good relationship with your team principal. And I think Toto's happy with George. Look, it's not, I mean, you could argue that maybe he wants Verstappen. I know that's kind of the name on everyone's mouth. They're all like, oh, maybe he'll pick him. But I think he's happy with George for now. He knows what he's getting with George. And with the contract conversations coming up, do I think it's going to be a long renewal? Probably not. I think Toto will keep his options open. But I don't think he's done with George just yet.
Yeah, and of course, if Toto was to get a Max Verstappen, that means there's a seat at Red Bull. And would you say George Caliber has proved enough as a driver that he deserves a seat amongst any of the big four teams, shall we say? Do you think they'll all be vying for him, or would he have to drop into the midfield?
Or I think perhaps it would be a Sainz situation, although that was slightly slightly different. I think he totally could be, well, he should be in a top 4 team. I think he's one of the drivers that is kind of underestimated, but he takes opportunities when they come. And, I believe it was in Austria last year when what happened between Max and Lando. He took it, and he went for it, and he takes risks. I know he was disqualified in Belgium, but he did take the risk. And I think that's kind of what you need to be at the top. You need to take those risks. So I think the question's more, would he suit Red Bull? I don't know. I don't know about. I don't know who would suit Red Bull, to be honest.
I tell you what, though. So there must be a part of George that if he was to be ousted from his position at Mercedes by a Max Verstappen, I can't imagine it being anyone else, to be honest. Mm-hmm. On a human level, there might be a bit of him that would go, well, I know where you'd hate me to go, Toto. Do you think that would be anywhere amongst his head?
Oh, maybe.
All those Mercedes secrets as well, over to Red Bull.
Oh, do you know, well, would Red Bull want the secrets at this point? I feel like Red Bull doing a little better than Mercedes at some points. But yeah, no, very, very fair point. I think, do you know what? I think George is very good at presenting himself really well. And I think that's a brilliant talent to have. But I think he also can get a little petty from time to time. I think as anyone can. And yeah, maybe he could go over to Red Bull for those reasons. But I just don't know if he'd really fit in with the vibe there. I couldn't ever see him. Maybe I could see him at McLaren, but I don't know if I could see him at Red Bull.
Do you mean like for all the things that Max has now tapped out of? Max has said, I'm not doing all of this other stuff that you guys want me to do with the TikTok, etc. And is it similar with George? He's a bit too almost sophisticated to be doing all that Red Bull culture things.
I don't know. I think it's more from the sense, I think Red Bull are very cutthroat. You know what? We don't really see George doing loads of TikTok stuff, to be fair. So maybe that's not his bag. Maybe it is. He looks a bit clueless when he was trying to do one with Dorian Pan and Kimi Antonelli. So maybe not. But I do think Red Bull's social media admin are very, very good. I will say that. I think them and V Carbs, fantastic. Love their stuff. I think it's just, I think it's the cutthroat element of it. It's quite hot. I feel like it looks quite harsh at Red Bull. I feel I'm not wrong in saying that, hopefully.
Yeah, well, it's not the culture that puts an arm around you if you make a mistake. We can definitely vouch for that, can't we?
Yeah.
Well, look, Karina, let's move it forwards and take a look at Williams Racing, who are now sitting pretty in P5 in the Constructors' Championship, which is basically best of the rest, isn't it? Like the top 4 are nailed in a sense of we don't know what order they'll come in, but we know who they are, the big 4 constructors in the world of Formula One. But P5 is definitely up for grabs. And after a good few years of investment, Williams are now sitting there. Their best start in Formula One in 9 years. And all of a sudden, Carlos Sainz has come to the party alongside Alex Albon. What have you made of Carlos over the last couple of races, particularly this race weekend?
I think he's been fantastic. It's great to see. He was one of the drivers that I felt bad for last year. I thought he wasn't kicked out of Ferrari because he was a bad driver. It's because Hamilton was there. And that's really all there was to it. And so I really did feel bad for him. And I think also we saw him drive to 5. Depends on how true it is, obviously, but that Toto didn't reach out to him. I imagine that might have knocked his confidence a little bit. But
why do you think that is?
Why Toto didn't pick him?
Yeah. Or even have a conversation with him.
I think he was so set on Antonelli. I think he knew. I mean, he said something like there was 5 minutes after he called up Antonelli, or some sort of quote like that. He knew he wanted Antonelli. I don't think it was ever a question of picking Sainz, which is interesting. But I suppose a lot of people have said that Toto kind of wants his own Verstappen, and he sees that in Antonelli. So, yeah, I did feel for Sainz, but I think he's done a fantastic job. I think he's really suiting the vibe of being at Williams. I think he gets the idea behind it. And I think it's a great relationship between him and Albon as well. I like the fact that during the race, there was a little bit of frustration from Sainz about having to sort of keep back so he could give DRS to Albon. But he got it. He understood it. He did the team game and they ended up with points. And it worked really, really well. Fair play to him.
Yeah, well, about Aston Martin, the existing P5, how are they going to be feeling about their chances? I mean, it hasn't really come come together for them this season so far, has it? And they really solidified themselves in there and got was the middle of the best of the rest. But now you've got the likes of Williams, the likes of Haas fighting for it. And there's been a lot of investment at Aston as well. 2026, they're going to have to step up, aren't they?
Yes, I think perhaps we're all a bit baffled what exactly happened so that they've dropped so low. It's a bit crazy to me, to be honest. And it's a shame because I really, really like Aston as a team. I think they are fantastic for things like fan engagement. So it's a shame that on track, it's just not looking as good. And I don't know what's happened there. It's so confusing and it's hard to even really talk about it because
I know they put a lot of focus into 2026, obviously with the personnel behind the scenes. And I'm sure in the interview with Andy Cowell, even, he said it's kind of 95% on the 2026 car and 5% on this one. But you don't want to let the momentum from this season fall away too early, do you? But listen, I've pulled it to Aston a bit too early there. I just want to round up Williams real quick and talk about Alex Albon, who has also been performing fantastically this season. But for the first time in a very long time, and in fact, his first time at Williams, he's been out-qualified back-to-back by a teammate. Now, the fact that this headliner has come in the shape of Carlos Sainz has been brilliant for Alex. But do you think he's going to, let's go back to that word again, pressure. Do you think Alex Albon's going to cope well with the pressure of having a well-performing teammate across the season?
I think that's something that he's asked about quite a bit, to be fair. I think he gets that question a lot, actually, about what it's like having Sainz there and does it push him? And he gives a very similar answer every time of, yeah, it's great to have him there. He's very data-driven. You know, I'm learning from him. He's learning from me. So I think as of right now, at least from the PR side of it, he's saying he's not feeling the pressure and it's all perfect and he's really happy. And do I think if it was a situation where Sainz, it's hard because I think even if Sainz outperformed him this year, I think whilst Albon could say, I've been in the team for longer, you know, I feel like that should happen for me. At the same time, Sainz is a race winner. So I don't think it would be surprising if that happened. And
I guess as well, the culture of the place would just be a great place to be as a racing driver because they're on the up. And even in our chat box, Felix is saying that Williams are the surprise of the young season so far. Gary's saying that they will hold on to P5 now in the Constructors' Championship. Karina, will Williams hold on to P5 in the Constructors? Are they the best of the rest for you across the duration of this 2025 season, and why?
I'm really, really hoping that they are. I've been saying for the past year-ish that I think that they've got a little something coming. They had their eyes, they're sort of focused on 2026, but they're not just dropping this season just yet. Like you said, you don't want to drop focus on it too soon. And I don't think they have done that. And I think that's really, really smart from them. I would love to see them in P5. I think they deserve it for how much they're really kind of pushing and they're trying to make changes. And that would be fantastic to see.
Let's take a look at Racing Bull's performance across the race weekend. Of course, it's been a tumultuous season for them just as much as it has for the senior team because they've lost their lead driver. They're then having to put their arm around Liam Lawson. Isaac Hadjar was possibly a bit of a surprise to come into the team as the second driver. But what have you made of Isaac Hadjar, who has scored points once again? Where do you put him amongst the grid of rookies? And again, I want to return to this idea of relative to the machine that he has.
I love Hadjar. I absolutely, do you know what? He has wowed me this so far. And because I feel like he went from that DNF and my heart broke for him when that happened because, well, it just did. But seeing the way that he's just changed throughout this season, I think it's been fantastic and he's scoring really well. I mean, Williams had to make a teamwork play to try and avoid Hadjar from catching up to them. So, look at him go. He is doing really well. And I feel like when it was announced that he was joining the team, perhaps there wasn't as much excitement or people talking about it as perhaps Behrman joining or Antonelli joining. But I feel like we're all a bit like, oh, okay. He's doing it and he's doing it well. And I'm impressed. I really like him.
Yeah, he was in the fight for the F2 Championship last season and was the favourite midway through. but then fell away quite heavily and stalled the car on the last race of the season in Abu Dhabi. And I know historically he hasn't actually won any championships across the junior series, but he's stepped up to the biggest race series in the world. And like you're saying, he's proven that he's got it. What does this mean for the future of Isaac Hadjar? Could we see him in a Red Bull one day?
I think we could, I think we could, but
what a great character to go with all of their online stuff that they love doing.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think it would be, do you know what? I would love it. Just from a social media perspective, love it. But I do wonder, I feel like Hamilton has a bit of a soft spot for him from what we've seen, the glimpse of what we've seen. And I do wonder whether perhaps later down the line, Hamilton would kind of maybe take like a slight mentoring approach towards Hadjar if Hamilton leaves. Would he then encourage him to go to Red Bull? I don't know. But, that's obviously not for Hamilton's decision. But just in like a little theory.
Yeah. Isn't he one of... I don't know if he's the first, but he's obviously one of very few Arabic racing drivers that have come through to race in F1. I don't really know. Can't think of any off the top of my head that in modern times, but that is a part of diversity that Lewis will be very much behind.
Yeah, exactly. I think it would be fantastic to see. I love the fact that we're starting to see a bit more diversity within F1. It's slow, but we're getting there. And yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense for Hamilton to kind of take that approach on him as well. So I would love to see him in Red Bull one day or one of the top teams, but we'll see how it goes. It might have been a great start for him and perhaps doesn't continue. For example, Colapinto, I think we were all a bit like, wow, that's amazing. And then, it wasn't, towards the end, it wasn't as groundbreaking. So maybe that would happen, but I hope not. I really hope he does well.
Yeah, Gary's saying Hadjar, third best rookie so far this season. I imagine maybe, Gaz, that's behind Antonelli and Behrman, possibly, who Behrman's only not scored in 2 races now, right? The first and then this one. And then Noah is saying it's a legendary rookie class. And yeah, I wonder if like in 10 years, we'll look back at this, like, we'll call it the class of 2025. And there might be multiple champions, or at least those guys battling for the championships as the years go on. Looking at the other side of the garage for Racing Bulls, Liam Lawson, a productive race weekend, I would say, putting the Racing Bull in Q12, qualifying 12th, and then a solid race. But I saw in the post race that he struggled in the traffic, and then of course the 10-second penalty that he got. What did you make of that?
With the penalty, I think it's fair enough. That is what it is, kind of thing. Yeah, I think with Lawson, I'm happy that he's able to get those kind of results. And it was a difficult start for him, but I think he seems to suit being at the V Carb team a bit more.
Do you think he needs to just maybe have a little bit of a lower profile? I'm not saying this, and I didn't really get the impression, but a lot of people were saying like, oh, he comes across slightly too confident.
Yes, I saw a lot of discourse about this. Do you know what? I think perhaps there was some things he shouldn't have done last year, like, some hand gestures and stuff. So, there are elements that I think he went a bit too far with, but I think we've all this thing of, we say, well, Norris isn't confident enough, and then Lawson's too confident. And it's like, well, what do you want then? I guess you could say just somewhere in between. But yeah, I think it's going to happen. People are going to be confident. Sometimes I think people might read a bit too much into certain statements and things that people have said as well.
Headlines again. It's just headline grabbing, like we mentioned earlier, didn't we?
Yeah. I think people read into the whole, oh, only one person congratulated him, and I'm like, well, maybe others didn't. They just didn't mention it. It's not. Who knows? We don't know what goes on here, so we just have to take it at face value. And it seems funny on social media, so.
Well, he can get his head down, hopefully, Liam Lawson, and get back to the good side of racing, because it was a tough time for him, wasn't it, at the Red Bull senior team. But let's turn our attention to Aston Martin now. We touched base really briefly on them during the Williams point, but it was another race weekend of no points. Lance Stroll had a very unwelcome record of the most Q1 exits in F1 history now, with 75. And I'm going to say in Stroll's defense, really, if we look at the performance of Fernando Alonso so far this season, who is considered one of the greatest, not only of his generation, but pound for pound racers, and considering the cars that he's been in, etc. And Alonso's finishes read none better than P11, two P11s, a P15 and two DNFs. So Stroll's had 2 points finishes, and it seems to have fallen away a bit, but it's got to be about the machine, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think, look, to some extent, it is about the driver's skills, but a large part of it does seem to be about the car. I don't think the car's really working for them. I think Stroll's one of the drivers that gets more hate than others, and I think sometimes that can make it a little bit more difficult to work out, is he really bad, or are people judging him unfairly? I think it's a little bit more difficult to work out with Stroll. And yeah, I mean, his comment about how if you put the McLaren drivers in a Sauber for 10 years, I don't think that quite made sense fully. I don't think
it's not going to get him any friends either, is it? I don't know on the grid, and then also fans, although I'm sure he probably doesn't care so much about the fans.
Yeah, no, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. But, he said what he wants to say about it. I think making that many Q1 exits, also not ideal. I'm a bit surprised, actually, that is the case. But, yeah, it's happening. And I don't really get what's going on, to be honest.
It's a big year for the team, isn't it? Next year, 2026, because, again, returning to all of the personnel behind the scenes and the investments that have been made. And will either of these drivers have any excuses if they aren't? I mean, what would you expect, Karina? Has it got to then be points for both cars every race next year for Aston Martin? Is it podiums that need to be happening? Like, how quick would you expect the turnaround to be? It feels like the impending turnaround that everyone expects to happen.
Yeah, I mean, what with Newey, Honda, and then the new facility, you'd like to hope that at least one thing will make things work better. And if you've got all three, hopefully something will do something. But no, I don't think that they will expect podiums from them. I also think it's a difficult one, because whilst I think people they either love to talk about it or they don't want to talk about it at all, at the end of the day, Lance Stroll is the son of Lawrence Stroll. And I think we don't know what the conversations are behind the scenes and how that's going to pan out. So I don't know if Lance was never going to be kicked out himself. I don't know if you could say that Alonso has to do the similar. So where would they make those kind of judgments? I think it's a really difficult one for them on that front. But you'd like to hope something. I hope something will change, because, I mean, yeah, they could get worse, but they can't get much worse at this point.
Yeah, we did see in testing, it was felt that perhaps they were the second weakest car, and at the moment they're not performing well, and they're very much fallen away from the momentum that they built during 23 and 24. No, sorry, 22 they started strongly first, didn't they? And 23, and then last year it fell away a little bit, and this year that trend seems to have continued. I don't want to keep you too much longer, my dear, because we're coming up to in and around our hour, but I mean, the next three teams we're going to take a look at also pretty much weekends to forget for the likes of Haas, Sauber and Alpine. But we'll start with Haas, who, after a shocking first race of the season, then secured points across the next three races. But it's another race with no points, didn't qualify strongly either. Thoughts around that, and perhaps why as well? I know a lot of people were excited about Ollie Behrman being back there because he performed so well on a whim in the Ferrari last season, but the Ferrari is a very different machine to the Haas, of course.
Yeah, look, I think we're all a bit surprised at what's gone on here, and for this year it feels a bit uncharacteristic of them. I feel like once we saw Komatsu come in, it felt like there was a bit of a shift with the team, and we saw them doing quite well, relatively well last year. And I'd say that this year they are currently, I believe, they're in sixth, if I'm right saying that, which is that's really good for them, to be fair. I believe in 2018 they were in fifth, but from 2016 to now, they've never been higher than they are right now, apart from that year. So they're doing better.
It's just about knuckling down, really, isn't it? I saw it might have been Fred Basser, even if I go back to the Lewis comments, and he said, and I've heard this from elite athletes in football as well when I've spoken with them and they said, don't get too high on the highs, don't get too low on the lows, so don't ever take yourself too seriously, but don't ever go in on yourself too much with that kind of negative spiral. And that's what they need to do, really, right? So just get back to the drawing board at Haas, and they've got 2 weeks now to turn it around for Miami.
Yeah, I think they'll do well. I'm quite impressed with them. I'm excited to see them fight against Williams. It's great.
And then what about Sauber? So Sauber, perhaps across the next 2 weeks, might not be able to edge out as much performance. The Hulk qualifying 18th, finishing in 15th, and then Bortoleto bringing in the rear of both qualifying and the race itself. And it's the back-to-back cars out in Q1 as well for this race now, with this race in Bahrain. We thought it would be a long season for the Sauber team, and then we were happily surprised when they picked up some points early in the season. But do you still think it's going to be a long, tough one for them?
Yeah, look, I don't think we were expecting miracles from them. They weren't either. They said to Bortoleto, this is where we're at the very start of the season. They knew that this was going to happen. I think it's probably a case of kind of resetting for 2026. I don't know if they care that bad about this year. They're going to have big changes coming. I think it's just a case of they're here now. And I suppose in a way, this year is kind of helping to train up Bortoleto, get Hulkenberg semi-used to the car. I really think it's that situation.
Yeah, good point up there. I never thought about that. Like, train up Bortoleto without any pressure whatsoever. All right, as long as the young man gets around the laps and sees the checkered flag, learn F1 for the season, and then he can. I don't know if his contract, does it extend to the Audi deal? Is it more than 1 year, Bortoleto? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know that one. No.
Yeah,
no.
I know. I kind of feel that you'd give the rookie in the Sauber more than 1 year because it is the Sauber and they know what's happening. But yeah, it sounds like the perfect opportunity and a really good point made there, Karina.
Yeah.
And just to wrap things up, Pierre Gasly, one of the guys I've really felt sorry for because had a good race in Bahrain and qualified really well, qualified strongly again here in Jeddah. And then again, only had a couple of corners in the race because of that incident with Yuki Tsunoda. But I guess the Alpine team will be really positive from these last two performances from Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, I suppose, the difference between Gasly and Doohan as well. I wouldn't say Doohan's quite at Gasly's level, but at the same time, Gasly has been performing pretty well. I think he was kind of coming into, it was either this weekend or last weekend, kind of merged together, but saying, I don't think I'm going to get to Q3. But then the commentators and people were saying, well, no, I think you could. You're doing quite well here. So, look, I think Gasly's doing well. I don't know about what's going on with Doohan yet. We will wait and see.
I've got Felix in the chat box saying world champion for 2026. Is that for Aston Martin, Felix? Sorry, if we picked that one up a little bit late there. So maybe off of the back of this supercar that's coming our way with the new regs with Adrian Newey and co, perhaps. Pretty sure it's not the Sauber. Or who knows? Maybe they're going to surprise us. And Felix is actually in from Germany as well. So maybe Felix is putting his money where his mouth is and putting it behind Audi. What kind of impact are you expecting Audi to have, Karina, when they come into the series in 2026?
I'd like to hope that they're going to shake things up. I mean, it's really difficult to say. They've done well in completely other different series. So they've, they can do well. I think it'll be a situation of kind of waiting to see what happens. But I mean, people have got some pretty high hopes about them coming in. There's rumors that Audi are going to really make a difference. So yeah, I'm quietly optimistic, but I suppose partly because I don't think you can get much worse than Sauber doing right now.
Yeah, just returning back to Alpine real quick on Jack Doohan, because it was just a race where it felt like he was going around. He pitted early on the safety car that came in, tried some kind of alternative strategy. I think most of the grid probably expected there would be another safety car because there was one so early, right? And it didn't come, although it keeps us at our 100% safety car record in Jeddah because there was one. But yeah, we did well to make it through the rest of the 49 laps without one. There was feedback on Jack Doohan from the last race that he was nearly there, I saw. As an F1 fan, are you seeing someone who's nearly there yet? What are your opinions on Jack in the last couple of races?
I think it's really hard to say what's nearly there. We don't know what metrics they're looking at, to be fair, but Look, I don't think he's set this like the same as the other rookies. I wouldn't say he's had as much impact, and I haven't noticed him as much. But I really feel for him because I feel like he's very well aware of the fact that he's kind of on like a countdown, and there's always someone waiting.
Do you think that's true? That rumor that's going around. There was one, wasn't it, that he's got 6 races, or you think that Colapinto is in the wings and there'll be an assessment made across doing? You think there's weight in that?
Well, the thing is that I think it was when I was looking at so when they put Hirakawa in for FP1 instead of doing, and I was a little bit confused because I thought surely if you're planning on either they've already decided he's gone after 6 races, or are they thinking we know that he's going to stay for longer, so we'll just give him the time? Because I thought if they're still deliberating, why would you give away a free practice session to a different driver?
Not from a rookie as well. Why not give him the practice session from Gasly, right?
Yeah. So I think they've made their decision. I don't know which way it's going though. But yeah, I have seen that it was 6 races. And I think often with rumors, especially nowadays, it feels like half the time that they are true or they are coming out of somewhere. Even the ones where I initially look at it and think, nah, not happening. Suddenly I'm very wrong. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, do you know what? Maybe there could be a swap, but I don't feel like the energy around it right now is feeling like there's going to be a swap imminently.
Well, we'll see how it all pans out. But listen, Karina, we've made it through the grid. We've made it through assessing the whole race, the ins and outs of it, all the way through from the powerhouse performance from Oscar Piastri through to the ones that weren't so lucky towards the back of the finishing line. But it's been a pleasure to have you on the show as well, I must say. You've been a real joy and your insights have been really spot on. So thank you so much for that. And let me ask you, have you enjoyed yourself as being a part of the show?
Yes, I've absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for having me. I think making short form content, I don't get to have these kind of talks. I don't get to talk to people in depth about it. So I love any opportunity that I can to do so. So yeah, thank you so much.
Well, yeah, that was the point of making this show as well. I thought it was a great way for not only me to make contact with content creators and influencers, but like you said, you only see these little snippets of them. And it's like, let's give them an opportunity to really flex their juices about these teams and see where their opinions and passions actually lie. So you've done yourself absolutely fantastic on the show this evening. So thank you for joining us. And hopefully we can invite you back sometime soon across the rest of the season. And you guys out there, thank you so much for joining us, particularly you regulars. So a big shout out to Gary, Felix and Noah. It's been a pleasure. But remember as well, guys, we need as much support as possible. So please like, subscribe, and spread the message as well. We will be clipping this show up into shorter form content with some of the magic from Karina a little later this week as well. But for now, have a great time. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Of course, we've got next weekend off. Bit of time to gather ourselves before we head to Miami. And I will be doing the review show on the 5th of May for that one. So thanks for joining us and have a great evening.